Welcome back, guys. Uh, Today I'm taking a look at kind of doing a comparison on driver install. Um, and I'm using Linux Mint as an example. Now, Linux Mint, as most of you know, is the number one distribution on DistroWatch. Uh, Linux Mint is used by millions of people, many of them, probably most of them, coming directly from Windows into Linux. Uh, when I did a comparison, when I did the driver install the other day on Debian, I was successful, but there were multiple steps that I had to go through. And I'm lucky because my NVIDIA card is uh, widely recognized, and so it makes it a little bit easier to install. If you're dealing with an ATI video card, that's not always the case. You've got lots of variables, and I see many more struggles within the ATI community versus the NVIDIA community. Now, that got me thinking that if you take a look at Linux distributions, the top three flavors of Linux would be, in my opinion, Ubuntu, Debian, and Arch. Debian is widely used, but they don't put an emphasis on desktop use. If you look at the desktop Debian environment, if you're dealing with Debian Jesse, if you download directly from the Debian site, you've got quite a chore ahead of you to get that desktop environment configured properly. Is it doable? Yes, absolutely. Is it a quality distribution? Absolutely, no question there. The question really comes down to would the average computer user be able to download Debian and install it and configure it as their daily operating system? And the answer to that question is, in my opinion, no. I have had some discussions with the folks over at Debian, and if any of you have gone to the Debian forum looking for help, it's not always easy to come by. The discussions that I've had related to desktop configuration, basically I was told, hey, Debian is for servers mainly. If you want to use it as a desktop, you're going to have to muddle through, find your own solutions, and good luck to you. Now, if you take a look at the distributions that have sprung up that utilize the Debian environment, the Debian operating system, the three main ones that come to my mind that have made inroads, that have improved the Debian operating system from a desktop standpoint, from a desktop environment, would be Sparky Linux, um, Point Linux, and MX15. Now, MX15, I believe, has made the most progress because if you look at their distribution, they have configured many proprietary configuration utilities that help the average user get their system set up. They've done a wonderful job, absolutely wonderful. And if I had to rate Debian desktop distributions, MX15 would be number one. And so what they do is they take the Debian operating system and try to make it usable and easily usable and configurable for the typical Linux user. That's quite a challenge. MX15, I believe, has come closest to achieving that. But Debian, right now, the way it stands, would not be what a typical Windows user would be moving to. So let's take a look at Arch. Arch has basically two sides of the coin. The plain vanilla Arch install, which is, as you know, is not easy. It it is satisfying when you finish it, but it's certainly not something that the average Windows user would migrate to. Uh, Very, very difficult. The end result is wonderful. Help is difficult to get in the Arch community, the plain vanilla Arch community, for some of the same reasons that it's difficult in Debian. They uh, don't have a lot of patience for people who have not spent hours and hours and hours and hours researching Arch Linux. And so, again, plain vanilla Arch Linux is certainly not something that the average Windows user would migrate to. If they did take a look at it, they'd be scared silly, and they would be running back to Windows, no doubt in my mind. So let's take a look at the alternatives. In Arch, you have alternatives. You have the next step up would be Architect. Architect has created an installer that is doable, makes it a lot easier. The Architect community is more likely to provide assistance. Uh, and the end result is a wonderful desktop. However, that's only the first step up. It's still not something that the average Windows user is going to migrate to. Next step up would be, in my opinion, Antergos. Now, Antergos has tried to develop kind of a hybrid. They created an easy install. They created an easily configurable desktop without throwing in a lot of, let's say, Antergos proprietary things. What they help you do is they help you get a workable desktop in the uh, desktop environment of your choice, because they do have most of the choices covered on the install. However, once you get that installed, if you go looking through the menus, there are not a lot of utilities, let's say, that will help the average user maintain their system. The next step up in Arch would be Manjaro. Now, Manjaro, in my opinion, is trying to do for Arch what Linux Mint has done for Ubuntu. Linux Mint has taken Ubuntu and made it as user friendly as humanly possible, in my opinion. Manjaro is trying to do the same thing with Arch, and Manjaro has been successful. If you go through a Manjaro install, the Manjaro install is just as easy as a Linux Mint install. There isn't any more difficulty involved. It's pretty intuitive and pretty self-explanatory. What you end up with is you end up with a desktop that has Manjaro proprietary utilities that will help you take the next step. Change a kernel, install drivers, and so they make it easier. Manjaro is trying to do to Arch what Linux Mint has done to Ubuntu. And Manjaro, in my opinion, for the average user, that is the way to go for a painless Arch experience. And for my operating system, Arch is my choice. Currently, I do have a plain vanilla Arch install running, I have a Manjaro install running, and I have an Antergos install running. And I also have this Linux Mint install. Now, let's take a look at Linux Mint as it compares to the Debian driver install that I did the other day. What I've done here is with Linux Mint, I have loaded up all my usual system tray utilities: Synapse, Redshift, psensor, Clipit, Caffeine. Right now I'm running Wi-Fi off of a dongle, which was recognized out of the box. Broadcom was not installed. The drivers were not installed out of the box. And the NVIDIA drivers were not installed out of the box. But as opposed to the Debian experience, where you have to go looking for the commands and the terminal information in order to manually install all those drivers, Linux Mint provides a driver manager. And again, what are they trying to do? They're trying to make it as easy as possible for the average Windows user to migrate to Linux. Linux has the deck stacked against them, in my opinion, and for one reason. If you buy a PC, it comes with Windows. If you buy a Mac, it comes with Mac OS. The only way to get Linux is for the user to install it themselves. That's the stumbling block. That's where Linux has to make inroads. There was a discussion on one of my videos the other day about Linux being a hobbyist system. Debian is certainly a hobbyist system. The average user is not going to buy a computer and go home and install Debian. It's not going to happen. The average computer user, if they buy a Windows computer and they bring it home, odds are they're going to stay with Windows unless Linux makes it easy enough for them to do an install with no problems at all. In my opinion, Linux Mint has come the closest to that goal. Linux Mint, if you install the XFCE or the Cinnamon desktop, the install is painless, intuitive, easily done, even by a novice computer user. Once they install the basic system, they have the driver manager to assist them in setting up their drivers. Now, I already tested this out, so I'm not going to go through the process. But if I click NVIDIA, I'm going to get 361, which is a fairly recent driver. If I click for my Broadcom, it's going to work. And if I click for Intel microcode, it's going to work. This is the second install that I've done. I did the first install and I went through this process. It worked flawlessly. I clicked apply changes. It applied the changes. I rebooted, and I had my drivers installed. So I'm not going to go through the process again and pause the video and come back to show you, because you'll you'll have to take my word for it. It works flawlessly. And so to wrap up this video, I've given you my opinions. I'd love to hear your opinions. But for in my opinion, if the goal of Linux is to get Windows users to migrate and use Linux, they need to make the desktop as easy as possible. Windows users, the average Windows user is not operating a server. Debian can spend all of their time developing the server end. It will be at the expense of the desktop user. The desktop user is on their own as far as Debian. The Manjaro environment is making so much progress that I believe they're very close to Linux Mint in providing a desktop that the average user can actually install, use, and maintain. But right now, in my opinion, the distribution that's most likely to lure Windows users to it and have them be successful in the transition is Linux Mint. And so, guys, I'd like to hear your opinions. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for stopping by the channel, and I will see you soon. Take care.